create a couple of classes using code in IntelliJ, but let me explain what we're going to do. First, we're going to create a class for points, and then we're going to create a class for lines, right? So when you think of a graph, you think of a y-axis and you think of an x-axis, right? So this is your x-axis and this is your y-axis. And then you have different points on these axes. So you might have points on this axis. For example, this point would be 1, 1, right? So this is its x-coordinate and this is its y-coordinate. You can have this here, which might be 5, 4. This would be the x-coordinate and this would be the y-coordinate. So you see, we can represent a point using its x-coordinate and a y-coordinate. So if we have a point class, if we had a class called point, then its attributes would be its x-coordinate and its y-coordinate. And then we'll have a point constructor, right? And we'll have some parameters in there. We can also have some behaviors of a point, some methods that can do something for us. For example, we can ask a point to give us back its x-coordinate. So we can say get x-coordinate can be a method, and we can also have get y-coordinate can be another method. And so this would be our point class. Now think of a line. A line extends from one point to the other, right? So a line would be a class again. And because a line extends from one point to the other, a line's attributes would be points and not just coordinates. So we can say its first point maybe is an attribute, and then its end point maybe another attribute, right? So these two would be the attributes of line. We can have a line constructor where we put in the parameters to construct a line. And then we'll also have, let's say, a method where we're getting the gradient of the line. So we can have gradient as a method. What is a gradient? Let me just explain that very quickly. A gradient is basically just how slanted a line is compared to the two axes, right? So let's say if you have a different line, which is, let's say, like that, this line's gradient would be higher than this line's gradient because this line is less steeper than this line. The more steep a line is, the more high its gradient is, the greater its gradient is. So a line that is completely flat will have a gradient of 0. But a line that is completely vertical would have a gradient of infinity. So you see, the more steep a line gets this way, the gradient keeps on increasing. So something like this will have some gradient. Something like this will have a higher gradient. This will have an even higher gradient. This will have an even higher gradient. So that is what a gradient is, how steep it is. The steeper it is, the higher its gradient. And how do we calculate gradient? It's extremely easy. We just take the 2 points, we take their y-coordinates and subtract them from each other first. So we say y1 minus y2, and then we divide by the difference of the x-coordinates. So we can have x1 minus x2. So let's say for this line here, the gradient will be the difference of the y-coordinates divided by the difference of the x-coordinates. So what is the difference of the y-coordinates for this line? We can say y1 is 4. So the y-coordinate for this point is 4. And the y-coordinate for this point is 1. Divided by the x-coordinate for this point is 5. And the x-coordinate for this point is 1. So that comes out to be 3 by 4, which is 0.75, right? So the gradient of this line would be 0.75. So every time we create a line, we don't want to do this again and again and again to find the gradient, right? So we'll just write a method for it. And then whenever we call the gradient method of a line, it'll just directly give us the gradient of that line. So that can be a method. Now, a line can have another property. It can have a length. So if we have 2 points and we draw a line between those 2 points, what is the length of the line? That is given by this expression. We find the difference of the x-coordinates, we square it. we find the difference of the y coordinates, we square it, we add them two together, and then we take the square root of the whole thing. So that can also be another method for the line. We can say find length, right? And this can be another method.